All right, it's been a couple months since I've had any updates about my Volkswagen swapped diesel Ranger. Wanted to kind of bring you up to speed on what happened. So late August, suffered a pretty spectacular and sudden engine failure. Was driving along, no problems, and then all of a sudden the engine started clattering very loudly, barely limped it home. Took a bunch of time to strip it down and try to diagnose and find out what happened. And so I'll show you the carnage. Basically, what seems like what happened was the exhaust valve on cylinder 1 completely shattered on me. Debris got into the combustion chamber and hammered itself into the piston crown and into the cylinder head. So that's junk, and I couldn't reuse that cylinder head because it's just too much material just damaged here, too much steel hammered into the head. Couldn't really machine it and re-weld it without it costing way more money than it was worth. So I happen to have a spare cylinder head in my collection. So rather than rebuild this, I used parts from this to repair the other cylinder head, which is what's currently in the truck. So I'm in hopefully the final phase of getting this thing back on the road, and wanted to kind of walk you through everything that had happened. All right, so this is the mostly rebuilt engine, new to me, refurbished cylinder head. Same cylinder head, except this is from a engine with 11 millimeter head studs instead of 12 millimeter head studs, so I had to drill out some of the holes to get them to fit correctly. But other than that, I had to also machine down the washers on the bolts, but other than that, it was fairly straightforward. My best guess for what caused the failure is originally, so I used a turbo intake manifold rather than the original sort of half snail shell manifold that comes over the top, so I can route it to the original air filter on the truck. And what I did was I pulled the PCV hose from the back of the cylinder head and originally had it going straight into this port here. The problem that I wasn't aware of is that this doesn't really have a sophisticated PCV system where the oil goes through a tortuous path over here and keeps the oil from coming out. It's just supposed to be vapor. It's basically just a mesh, like a wire mesh over here, not a whole lot. So I think what happened was, I think oil vapor and actual liquid oil built up in this hose, and over enough time, it condensed into an actual slug of liquid and then got sucked in and went straight into here and down into cylinder 1 and caused the, it could have hydrolocked it or possibly pre-detonation or some combination of the two. It made that cylinder run super hot and it got incompressible, and then that exhaust valve was the weak link. So what I've done here, and I suspect that because when I took this apart, there was a bunch of motor oil just right under here and all the way into the intake manifold. That was the only difference between cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4. The other possibility would have been a bad injector, but I had those pop tested, and all 4 injectors, they're not great, and I'm going to replace them, but they're all sort of the same level of poorly worn out, functional, sort of work, sort of don't work, but none of them would have caused a failure like that. So what I did instead, this time around, I added an oil catch can between the cylinder head and the intake manifold, so hopefully that will prevent that from occurring again. Overall, I'd say I got very lucky with the failure. The head was no good, and obviously the one piston was destroyed, but I pulled it down to the block and inspected it. There was only really one scratch in the number 1 cylinder bore that I was able to smooth out, and I got a new old stock used piston and new old stock rings. Dropped the pan, pulled the rod was fine, the crankshaft journal was fine, the bearing was fine, nothing was bent, nothing was worn out, nothing was scratched. So I took the old piston out, put a new piston with new rings into it, reinstalled the connecting rod, torqued it down, put the pan back on. That was after I scraped that scratch out of the cylinder, and then I started putting it all back together with the refurbished 11 millimeter head. So now I'm installing new heat shields into each of the injector ports before I install the original injectors. I've got plans to replace the injectors. I'll get some refurbished ones from online, but they worked pretty well beforehand and they tested okay. So for the purpose of getting this thing back on the road, I'm just going to reuse them. And I think, I hope that'll probably not bite me going down the road, but we'll see. Now, these are my original injectors. These will get replaced later on. I'm just going to put a small dab of anti-seize on the threads, and then looking online, the recommendation is to reduce your torque for installation by about 20%, because now you've got some lubrication on the threads. You don't want to over torque it and pull the threads out of the head. And I'm just putting just a little dab right on the bottom of the thread, and very carefully thread it in by hand. So I've got these labeled. This one's the number 1, so I'll start with that and work my way through the other three. One socket that actually fits onto these things, such a weird shape. Okay, snug it down and get the torque wrench. Do 41.5 foot-pounds because I put anti-seize on the threads. Okay, that's one down. That's 2. Okay. 3. And 4. Cool. All right. Now let's get those injector lines bent back into location, more or less. First, and I'll run the lead lines afterwards. I feel like this will be easier to do this way. Maybe I'll be wrong, who knows. Okay, and the rest of these injectors tightened up now. Don't want to over tighten them, otherwise it'll crack the flare fitting. Just snug, just, you know. Elbow tight, elbow tight. Okay. Now I gotta rerun the little hoses. I hate those. Oh, friggin' hoses. All right, now we're gonna tighten on. I have a throttle position sensor on here. I don't really need it to run the engine, but I reused the onboard computer because this truck needs to meet New Jersey inspection. So all the sensors from the original Ford engine are now living on the Volkswagen engine and pulling, you know, actual data. It's not junk data. It's actually good data. The computer has to stay happy so it doesn't throw any codes. And that took a lot of time to figure out. And so I took the original Ford throttle position sensor and I mounted it on top of the injection pump, as you see right here. Okay. The last piece is to reattach the wires for the solenoid. Got it. All right, I think I've got it all set up now that I can try to start this thing. It's plumbed. I've got oil, coolant, fuel. All the pipes and hoses are tight. Nothing's leaking yet. The wiring's not fully routed yet because part of the build here is you have to run the engine, get it up to temperature, and then I guess pull the head cover after you stop it, and give all the head bolts another quarter turn to snug them up after everything heats up. But you got to get it started for that to work. That's installed. I'm just gonna add the wire holders over here so nothing chafes. It's just zip ties. All right, let's try to start it. I'll turn the
Heck yeah!
That sounds better than it did before. Good job. That runs a little bit.
How come you have
There's probably a fuel pocket of air in the fuel system has been sitting for so long. That's that sound. Uh-oh. Yeah, it normally vibrates a lot, but that seems like a lot more than normal.
No more vibration. Yeah, it's
Oh, I didn't like any of that. It sounded like it was tightening up.
Yeah, it's vibrating a frightening amount. You want to stop the video?
Yeah, stop the video. Okay, crisis averted. I thought that it wasn't, that it was starting to slow down because I thought that maybe something was tightening up. Maybe the oil pump wasn't working or the camshaft was starting to seize. It doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like it's fuel starvation. There's actually two of the flat gaskets on the injection pump are just weeping fuel now. I guess the cold weather finally killed that pump, so I must be sucking air into the fuel system, and now it's just getting it airbound. But sounds fine to me. I'll just let it keep running to warm it up. I think we're good.